Okay, hello Year 9. Today then we're going to focus on what you know is going to be your end of year test. There are two sections to this test. One is the reading paper, which you can see outlined on the left hand side of the screen, and one is the writing half, which is outlined on the right hand side of the screen. In previous lessons or previous recordings, we have covered question 1, which is the find the fact question, which is marked out of 5. Please see previous lessons for guidance on question 1. Question 1's in green because it's something we've already covered in lessons. Today we're going to move on to reading paper, question 2. This arguably is a harder question than question 1. Okay, and it involves you analysing evidence of feelings. It's marked out of 10, which means then you'll need 10 quotes for question 2 and explain how a character is thinking or feeling. Louis Westwood has said hello in the chat. Hello, Louis. Sorry, Louis, I'm recording this for a revision guide for your exam later in the year. Okay, so today we're working on question 2. Analysing evidence of feelings, quotes that link to feelings. I'll repeat, 10 marks for this one, so 25% of your grade will come from question 2 alone. So a really, really important question to get your head round and think how best to answer it. Now, question 2 is harder than question 1 because it involves a skill called inference. Inference is a bit like saying what something suggests, what something implies, what something is hinting at, I suppose. It will ask you to get a basic response, simply find evidence, find quotes and explain them. Do that 10 times and you'll get a mark of 6 out of 10, the pass grade. An advanced response will ask you to use PETAL paragraphs, which stands for point, evidence, technical language, A for analysis, and L is link back to the question. To get an advanced response then, it will require you to make sophisticated inferences. In short, think really in a lot of detail what you can tell based on the writing being given. What can you guess based on the writing you're given? And again, you need 10 of those, 10 quotes or 10 inferences to give you your response. Now, to help you out a bit, so far it might be a case of, I know what you mean by evidence or quotes. I understand that I need 10 of them, but you might be a little bit, well, I'm not quite sure what inference is. I'm now going to play you a short video, not the whole thing, you can see it's 6 minutes something in total on the screen, a short video just recapping the absolute basics, hello Maury, of what inference actually is and what that actually means. It's based around sort of primary school, I will tell you that. It is a very simple video, but hopefully enough just to get you thinking what it might be before we actually hit something that's a lot more like year 9. Okay, I'm now going to play the video then and sign in on the register anyone who's just come in. Okay, very basic version there, but it does talk you through how you go about tackling this kind of question. This is a really popular one at GCSE, a question that does come up at least 3 times during your GCSE studies. And in Year 9, obviously we just set you a slightly easier text to base your inferences on, but the principle is the same. The addition of a cute little cartoon penguin obviously makes it slightly more annoying to watch than you might think. But I didn't. Oh, Josh, it does. Josh has said in the chat that the video didn't play. Hopefully, when the recording, the video is downloaded, Josh, you'll see the video. But hopefully, you're able to read along even if you can't hear it. And certainly, as I'll now recap, it's a straightforward skill. It just involves a bit of thought. So inference just involves looking at the evidence and thinking what the evidence suggests, implies, infers, or what you can guess about it. Okay, you'll need to do that 10 times to get 10 out of 10 marks. I now roll forward. There we go. So let's take an example, a fairly well-known example. In Snow White, the author plants clues that the reader will infer that the stepmother is a bad character. So as we watch the film Snow White, there's lots of hints that the stepmom is really quite a nasty little so-and-so. There's plenty of evidence to support the inference. She tries to feed Snow White a poisonous apple. She speaks harshly to mirrors, and she's horrified when she isn't considered the fairest in the land. She's so evil she plans to kill off Snow White. So there's lots and lots of things that potentially are going to hint that Snow White has got this evil stepmother. Even the picture there suggests that she is not the nicest character. She is wearing black. She seems to be looking sinister through her facial expression. These are other hints that she is an evil character. This is what we call inference. Okay, what can we tell about a person and their feelings based on what we've read? Now let's take the same principle and apply it to a photograph. You can see a picture there of Aleppo. This is a city in Syria. There are lots of clues here what Aleppo might have gone through, how the people feel, and what might have happened. I can tell you the town of Aleppo is suffering, but what evidence can you tell for that? So if I asked Noah, how can you tell that the town of Aleppo is suffering? What evidence would you give for that? If you could post your answer in the chat, please, that would be awesome. Can you tell me where you can see it? Can you give me some evidence? Describe something in the picture that suggests the town is suffering. Noah has replied in the chat, you can see it. I'm asking Noah where his evidence, where can he see it? Thank you, Louis. You were saying then the evidence of the broken houses suggests that the town is suffering. Noah has added by saying it is destroyed. From the buildings and the rubble he can see there, he is suggesting the town of Aleppo is suffering. Notice how I'm wording this. I'm naming the evidence and then going on to explain what that suggests. If I said to you then, the people are suffering, we have Cameron now commenting in the chat, people are carrying their belongings. If we think where we'd expect to see people carrying their belongings and then link that to the rubble around them, that then suggests that they are suffering. It suggests perhaps their homes have been destroyed and they're having to walk away from the city. Good. If we now zoom in, look closer at the rubble, is there any particular part of that rubble that tells us something perhaps a bit more distressing or in more detail about why they're suffering? For example, thank you, Louis. Louis has replied in the chat with dirty clothes. So he's pinpointed a small part of this whole picture, a picture with lots of details, and now zooming in on dirty clothes that imply very strongly that the people of Aleppo and the town itself are suffering. That's inference. All 5, 6 people who have just commented are all using basic inference skill in order to form their response. That would then be the evidence of it is destroyed, the evidence of carrying their belongings, the evidence of dirty clothes, the evidence of broken houses are 4 pieces of evidence in total, which would get me a mark of 4 out of 10. Okay, and that's how this question works. Okay, how many bits of evidence can you use to infer? Jumping over to Harley. Harley, looking at the evidence in front of you, what do you think caused the suffering? Where have you seen pictures like this before? Harley, where might you see pictures like this? Think about where you might find images like this. If you Google search for an image very similar, what would you need to search for? If anyone else has any suggestions, please put them in the chat. I've noticed Kai can use his microphone, so feel free, Kai, to turn that on and tell us if you want to. Where might we see images or photographs like this? Cameron has commented in the chat, war zone and bombing. He's linking this idea to a war zone then. He's seen pictures like this before. Josh has now added a particular war zone, in particular World War II. Both of those are right. Both of those could be right. And Harley's then added a natural disaster, tornadoes. So all 3 of those are commenting on and inferring where they might have seen images like this before. Louis added after a disaster, and Kian has added he's used to seeing images like this on the news. So you already know quite a bit about the story that could be behind this photograph based on other experiences, your experience in other subjects, or indeed watching television. Kai's now added earthquake. So we've got a choice here between a war or a natural disaster, both of which could happily cause the picture you see on the screen. Now, to go back to our original 3 responses, as more people are adding natural disasters on the bottom there, any of which could be true. If we now jump back over to our original 3 responses, we had war zone and bombing, blitz from World War II, tornadoes. Now, only one of those can actually be accurate. Looking at our original 3, war zone, blitz, tornadoes, only one of those can definitely be true. If we look closely at the image, what evidence is there, for example, that it is a war zone? From Cameron, who said war zone and bombing. Well, the ruins suggest it's a war zone. The buildings that seem to be half destroyed above them or to the sides of the image also suggest some kind of bombing. But for it to be the blitz from World War II, we would need to see something else in this image as well. If it was a World War II picture, we would notice something else in that image. What would that thing be, Josh? Can you think? What if it was World War II? What would I expect in this photograph to tell me it was definitely World War II? And this is something that's not currently there. Which is why we know that that cannot be a right answer. People on the floor dead. Yes, you might expect to see more people or dead bodies if it was World War II. We know that was quite a lot more bombing than perhaps is evident in the picture. So black and white photograph, says Cameron. Correct. They did not have colour photographs in World War II. They had black and white ones. So we would expect, if it was World War II, we'd probably expect the image to be black and white. So there are other clues that we might bring into play to work out which is the right answer. Now, Harley, amongst others, typhoons were mentioned. Harley mentioned tornadoes. What would we expect to see in the image if it was a typhoon or tornado? What other clues might there be if that was true? Rather than some kind of war zone. Water, yes, I would agree, Josh. If it was a typhoon or tornado, I'd probably expect to see a lot more water in this image. I'd expect to see evidence of rainfall, perhaps, or a bit more evidence that there was a high wind. I'm not seeing that in this image. I don't see water there, so I'm eliminating the idea of it being a typhoon or perhaps a tornado. So it leaves me with Cameron's original answer of war zone and bombing. So I have to think, rather than going, okay, what could this be? I look at the image carefully and I come to a conclusion based on all the evidence I can see. It's likely to be a war zone, it's Aleppo, because we're told that in the question, and we've already gone through the evidence to prove Aleppo is suffering. So it's just being a bit careful over what's likely to be the most true, rather than just giving as many answers as we can. Okay, let's move on to an actual piece of writing. Here is an example question 2 then, how it would be worded in the test. How does the writer show what a soldier goes through while he's at war? You've then got a piece of writing to read. And let's say this was marked out of 5. So let's say for this question 2 I only get 5 marks. What 5 pieces of evidence could I possibly talk about? I'm leaving you to read it through. And I'll leave that for 2 minutes. Okay, Josh, Josh has commented in the chat. He's still on the screen on the previous slide. You should be able to scroll to the next one, Josh. I'm not sure you can go further ahead than me, but you should be able to scroll to the next one without a problem. And I'm recording the lesson just in case. Kian, you might have to leave the meeting and come back again. Kian is commenting in the chat. My screen is just all white. You might have to exit and then rejoin the meeting, Kian. I think would resolve that problem. Okay, for the purposes of Kian, then I am going to read out what's on the screen. That should help you, Kian, at least get an idea of where the chat's coming from, if nothing else. So the question is, how does the writer show what a soldier goes through while he's at war? The text, or the piece of writing that question is based on, reads as follows. As I stand still, knees shaking, arms heavy, all I can see is the remains of the land that I knew, the remains of men who died for our country. These poor souls, they were once soldiers, brave men and boys who took up arms for their country. Now they are food for crows. I looked down, my palms were stained with their blood. I tried to help them, holding their heads in my arms as their eyes went to heaven and their blood trickled into the mud. The smell of scorched earth is lodged in my nostrils. The memory of 1,000 bombs still fresh in my mind. My feet stand on the remnants of shell cases as the wind calls in the darkness, past my ears, into my brain like a knife. My eyelids flutter back to life as I continue my hunt through the killing fields. If I was to now ask how the soldier feels in a one-word answer or one sentence only response, let's jump to Will. Will, could you summarise or give me a short version, please, of how this soldier feels? Just a sentence of maybe 5 words. This soldier feels something, something, something. And your experience or knowledge of soldiers should help you answer that. Thank you. So Will has started off our answer. He said, as an overview, as a summary, the soldier feels scared because people are dying. Now that's certainly worth 1 mark. It's accurate. There's evidence there to prove that. So he get 1 mark so far for understanding the extract as a whole. Okay, I said it's worth 5 marks in total, so we need another 4 marks to complete our 5 out of 5. Louis is now offering in the chat that he is distraught, but now I'm going to ask Louis where his evidence is. Louis, could you give me a quote, either a sentence or 2 to 3 words from this answer that suggests the soldier is distraught? And could you put that quote together with your idea into a full sentence, please? The quote, something, something, suggests to us. Please select your evidence to prove what you're saying. While Louis is thinking about how he's putting his answer into a sentence, there we go, thank you. The brave men and boys who took up their arms for their country. So Louis' answer would now read, the quote, the brave men and boys who took up arms for their country, suggests to us that the soldier feels distraught. And that would give him 1 mark. Add that to Will's comment. Our answer would now read, overall, the soldier feels scared because people are dying. The quote, brave men and boys who took up arms for their country, suggests to us the soldiers are feeling distraught. That would then be 2 marks so far. You'll notice I'm linking the word us, which links to the reader, and I'm beginning to think how to actually write my answer in full. Cameron in the chat has now added, he talks about the senses like smell, sound and sights of war. Cameron's now adding mark number 3, and once more, Cameron, could you please give me a quote, a line from the text to prove what you're saying? Can you give me a sentence from the extract that proves that they are talking about the smell or sound or sights of war? Give me an example. Give me evidence. Thank you. Cameron has added in the chat, the smell of scorched earth is lodged in my nostrils. I can now add that to Louis and Will's answer by saying, the extract continues with the quote, the smell of scorched earth is lodged in my nostrils. This suggests the writer is using all the senses to emphasize the smell, sound and sights of war. That does not yet tell me, actually no, it does answer the question. The question is what the soldier goes through, and that does give me an answer. We now have a mark then of 3 out of 5 for this question. If we can continue to get up to 5 out of 5 then, I'm now going to ask please Grace. Grace, could you select a quote from the extract, either 2 words or more, and then say what that suggests to us about what a soldier is going through. And lastly, while Grace writes that up into the chat, could I also ask Phoebe, who I think is now there? Phoebe, if you can hear me, could you please select a quote and please tell me what it suggests to us about what a soldier goes through in war? Okay, unfortunately, I don't have either of those two yet comment in the chat. In the interest of a revision video that isn't filled with blank spaces, would anyone else like to give us the last two quotes? I need 2 more marks. I've got 3 out of 5 so far. Thank you, Grace. There we go. Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Grace. Grace has now added the memory of the quote, the memory of 1,000 bombs suggests to us they still remember it clearly because of how scared they might have been. Yep, so that would be now 4 marks out of 5. And Josh has added the soldier that it suggests that the soldier is petrified. I now have a mark of 4 out of 5, which gets me over half marks, which would then be the equivalent to getting a grade 5 in this test. Okay, thank you very much then for everybody who's participated in that short discussion and thinking about how the soldier's feelings are inferred based on the piece of writing you see on the screen. That then is about the same difficulty as you'd have in the Year 9 test. That is about the level of difficulty you're going to be faced with in the exam hall. Another example might look as follows, and this is the one taken from the booklet. You can see how it'd be written underneath, A, B, C, and the question is now, what's the writer's opinion of advertising? So you can see what's the writer's opinion of advertising is the question. You have the text underneath beginning with pervasiveness, sorry, and it ends with not yet fully developed. And what you'd be looking for then is once again around about 5 facts to prove, 5 quotes to prove the writer's opinion of advertising. How is the writer's opinion inferred? How is it suggested based on the wording used? Once again, I'm going to read this example out to see how we go. Pervasiveness and repetition act like a battering ram against our minds. The first time we see an advertisement, we are likely to be aware of what it's telling us and what it is encouraging us to buy. From then on, we process it passively, absorbing its imagery and messages without contesting them, as we are no longer fully switched on. Brands then become linked in ways our conscious minds fail to detect. Messages used by advertisers are designed to trigger emotional rather than rational responses. The low attention processing model developed by Robert Heath at the University of Bath shows us how, in a crowded advertising market, passive and implicit meaning learning becomes the key drivers of emotional attachment. These are particularly powerful among children, as the prefrontal cortex, which helps us interpret and analyze what we see, is not yet fully developed. You can see there then, much harder text for this one. And it's all making clear the writer's opinion of advertising. Now, as you can see, part of it is in yellow. That is the part that's been highlighted in yellow at the top of your screen. And indeed, I believe this is highlighted in the booklet as well. How is it inferred then? How is it suggesting the writer's opinion of advertising? Well, you could look at the word being used. Okay, some of the words being used there. You could look at the tone of voice, how formal or informal, how friendly or unfriendly the writing sounds. And we can look at the order it gives those ideas. It's clearly quoting a person from the University of Bath. And it seems to use certain techniques to get across its points. So if I was to ask about that bit in yellow, pervasiveness and repetition act like a battering ram against our minds, some of you will already notice the label. I've labelled this as a simile. This will also gain marks in the test. If I was to ask you by scanning through the work, anywhere between line 1 and 4, that is line 1 and 4, can anyone locate where the alliteration is? So technical language or words like noun, verb, simile, alliteration do get marks in this test. Can anyone locate the alliteration being used in this answer? Would be correct. Thank you. Cameron has posted in the chat, as has Josh. Process it passively is absolutely accurate. Now, unless you knew what alliteration was, you wouldn't be able to give that response. So this might now read, the alliteration process it passively suggests to us the writer feels that we don't really think about advertising. We don't really acknowledge it. We don't really let it affect us. The alliteration process it passively suggests to us that we don't really take on board the message of advertising. This would then be a higher level response because I'm using technical language. Now, before we go on to look at this extract in a bit more detail, I'm now going to scroll forward for the last section of today's lesson to remind you of the techniques, some of the techniques you should now easily be able to label. This links back to the work we did in Year 7 and Year 8 and earlier in Year 9, where I have mentioned in the past how it's really important to learn the names of basic techniques so you can find that in a piece of writing in order to gain marks from it. Here is a list then of some of those original 20 I originally gave you listed now. You should know what each one of these words mean. Word, sentence being the very, very easy ones. The ones in purple are a little bit harder. Noun, verb, adjective, adverb, pronoun, simile. Then we go on to the ones that are more likely to appear in your Year 9 test, things like repetition, descriptive sentences, lists, alliteration, statements, metaphors, and lastly personification. There are about 50 you could be asked in the test, over 50 in total, but these give you the most common ones. The ones in a Year 9 test are likely to be the ones you're going to be able to find in the work. Now, once you've learnt these 15, it would be a case of then trying to spot them in the work itself. On the last screen, we noticed there was a simile and 2 people were correctly able to say where the alliteration was. So they would be able to gain the marks by using technical language. On the next screen are going to be the answers. Once I've shown you these answers, I will ask you to go away and learn those ready for next lesson. Certainly, these are words you should already know from previously in Year 9, where I did set the homework to learn these, as well as Year 8 and 7, and indeed primary school. Okay, there was a reason why you've had to learn those, because they do get marks at this stage. Okay, for question 2, then you would need technical language to get more than half marks on the exam paper. Okay, let's go through some of the answers to these then, and then I will stop for today before I resume and add more detail come next lesson. So answers then for technical language, what each word means. We have a word, which is a written thing on a page that links to a particular concept or idea. A sentence is a group of words with a clear meaning, including a noun, verb, and connective. Number 3, a noun is an object, person, or place. A verb is a doing word or action. An adjective is a describing word. An adverb is describing an action, a word that describes a movement of some kind. A pronoun is a word that takes the place of a name. For example, you, he, she, us, or we would also count. 8 is a simile, 2 things compared using the word like or as. A descriptive sentence is a sentence with lots of adjectives in it. For example, the writing about a soldier earlier in today's lesson was filled with descriptive sentences, and many of those using the senses correctly labelled by Cameron in the chat. 10, a list, a group of objects with something in common, normally with commas in between them. Repetition, saying the same thing more than once, and that could be the same word appearing in a paragraph or the same idea appearing in a paragraph. Number 12, alliteration, using words with the same letters in the same sentence, correctly labelled process it passively by Cameron and Josh in the chat there. That's how they knew it was alliteration, because process and passive both begin with a P, and that would give them the chance to mention that is being alliteration being used. Number 13, a statement, a sentence which sounds true or an account of something. Number 14, a metaphor, saying something is something it definitely isn't. And 15, personification, giving an object human qualities. I think the example I normally give, the tree waved its branches. Trees do not wave, they're not human, they don't wave, so that is an example of personification. Another example might be the sun smiled. The sun does not have a face, it does not have lips, it does not have a mouth, so it cannot smile. So by saying it does, is emphasizing how friendly the sun is, but of course the sun itself does not actually smile. Okay, the homework, if you will, if you need it, before next lesson then, is to learn the features on the board. It's one of the last times I'll ask to do that. And next lesson, I will start off then by testing these 15 and asking you to respond. I'll also do the same thing next time I see you when we're all back in school, and start the first lesson back with this basic test, because these are things by now that in year 9 you should have a grip on fairly securely in terms of what a noun, verb, adjective, metaphor, statement, alliteration, etc. is. So thank you very much. That was our revision video or revision lesson for question 2, ready for your year 9 test. And that's revision question 2 part 1, with part 2 following next lesson.